The trade deadline has passed. There might be a deal or two that trickles in. I just saw one involving a reliever with the Mets. So still could happen, but still, we are done, and some big names remain. Some big names moved. We'll talk about that all on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. Everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Fred Zinkie, trade deadline edition. Fred Zinkie and I are excited to talk about that. We purposely scheduled this to be so at the end to make sure that we get all the trades, 90% of the trades. We're going to start tackling that right now. The big news today, of course, Fred, was Justin Verlander going to the Astros.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't this just feel like the perfect fit? Right? Like, this is clear. This is a team where, I mean, Verlander, he goes to the Mets. He's a little shaky at the start of the year, opens the year on the IL, 4.80 ERA in May, then rounds back into form in June, 3.33 ERA, July, 1.69 ERA. I think it was a 1.02 whip this last month now, 4 wins and 6 starts. So he's ramped up into form. Now he's going to go back to a Houston team where he was consistently amazing. He had a whip below 1 in every season that he was with the Astros. And to me, this just has a feel of something that's going to be a game changer for that team in real baseball. And I guess he's already awesome in fantasy, but maximize his fantasy production for the rest of the season.
Yeah, anybody that's got the hammer, though, in AL only leagues is very happy with this.
Yes. So Scherzer, so you're in AL. So Scherzer would have soaked up that hammer from someone, I would assume, on Sunday night.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoever had the hammer probably used it on Scherzer.
And who would you rather have, Scherzer or Verlander? I mean, it's Scherzer plus 1 week or Verlander. Yeah. I think that's the thing you got to realize just a little bit there.
For me, Verlander was just so good with Houston, like right up to last season. And it's just such I don't know. It just seems like such a comfortable fit for him that I would take him over Scherzer. I mean, Scherzer could be awesome with the Rangers. He probably will be really good. But I don't know. I have to, just because Verlander's been so good with Houston, I would take him. Yeah. But if I use the hammer on Scherzer, I wouldn't be very, very regretful of it.
So unfortunately, I don't have the hammer. I'm tied for second hammer, but I win the tiebreaker by losing. I could not have gotten either Scherzer or Montgomery last week. Squandering of other fab to fill other holes. I would just never had a chance. And I've reclaimed $280 in injured players already, and it still wasn't enough to have a hammer for this. So I will not be getting Justin Verlander, probably. Our good friend who we listened to last week, Joe Sheehan, will have said hammer and will be now the Justin Verlander, proud owner of Justin Verlander. What Verlander, I mean, looking at him this year, he's been better lately. Hasn't been amazing so far this year. First of all, obviously got hurt on opening day. That was, that kind of set the tone for the Mets. He goes, didn't get hurt on opening day, but it went on the IL on opening day. Now he goes to Houston where he had so much success before. The Astros, I mean, they really needed this. They really needed another starter. Christian Javier was struggling of late. They've been using, Hunter Brown has been a little shakier lately. Even Framber has been a little shakier of lately. They needed another arm at the top of that rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. But it does. So now it sets themselves up, I think, to have at the very least a good rotation, and if everything broke right, a very dominant rotation, right? Yeah. If their starters who had struggled at times this summer round back into form, a top 3 of Verlander, Valdez, and Javier, really good, and then Hunter Brown or JP France or whatever can be your 4th or 5th. That's a really good. Yeah, Jose Urquidy's going to come back at some point soon, which isn't a game changer, but it's just another innings eater if they were to have an injury at some point, or wanted to go 6-man for a stretch for a couple turns. So yeah, they're in good shape. I still think we'll see where it happens here in the next few minutes, just with maybe the odd trade trickling through, but I still think that a healthy Astros team is the best one in the American League.
Yep. So BZA, RZA, GZAS, 6-man rotation in Houston now. Maybe. I mean, kind of. I think maybe they start that way. JP France, he's been pretty good. I mean, he had some rough spots. I still don't really believe that he's that good of a pitcher. I mean, 10 homers allowed though in 91 innings. That's passable. 64 to 26 K to walk in 91 innings. You'd like to see him miss more bats, but at the same time, he's done one thing. He's been stable. He's gotten them innings, averaging 6 innings a start. He'll take that. Even with Urquidy back, maybe they pick they give Javier an extra day. Maybe they give Hunter Brown an extra day here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think France, actually, I agree with you. I don't think France is very good, but he's been a bit of a savior for them, just helping cover them through, like giving them, I mean, better results probably than his skills indicate that he should have got. But from an Astros perspective, who cares? You got the results. So you've got a guy with a 2.85 ERA. He's giving you 15 starts with a 2.85 ERA. Like there's no way like Houston would have been over the moon if they thought in spring training they could get that from JP France. If he didn't give them anything else this season, he'd be, one of their more probably maybe their most surprisingly valuable contributor.
For sure. So, the other angle to this is that the Mets paid a lot of this contract to make sure they got 2 prospects, good prospects coming back. The Astros' 2 best prospects, at least according to James Anderson's prospect rankings: Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford in this deal. Gilbert, an outfielder; Clifford, probably a first baseman. The Astros now don't have anybody in James's top 100. Clifford was just barely outside it anyhow at 101, but they did this also in the Scherzer deal, where they took on a lot of the contract to make sure they got the prospect coming back.
Yeah, so this is a different way for the Mets to use their deep pockets. And I mean, we'll see from some of the things that I've read on Twitter this afternoon. It seems like they're actually going to take maybe a little more of a step back and try to aim for a couple years from now. Right. Maybe not even try to totally regroup for next year. Like maybe they're not going to dump all these 40-ish-year-old pitchers and then just pick up a bunch of other old pitchers next year and just try to do it all over again. So maybe they're going to try to do things the right way here. So this was a way for them to effectively buy prospects, right?
Yeah.
And maybe there were other teams interested in Verlander who were saying, we want you to, like, we'll take him on, but it's a lot of money, so we're not going to give you that much for him. And maybe they were because they have deep pockets, they were fully focused on the prospect return and said, we can afford to pay a lot or the rest of this contract in return for better prospects. So, good for them. Maybe this is a smarter, more sustainable plan. We know the Mets have deep pockets. They're going to hit on something at some point where they're going to be a good team. I think. I could be wrong. I think they're going to be a good team for a while at some point. Looking back, they just have to look across New York. There was a long run where the Yankees were really good, where they had both deep pockets and a good backing of homegrown talent, right? There were times during that Jeter, Posada, Rivera era where they had a balance of bringing in big name free agents and also having some studs that they had brought through their system. Maybe the Mets now can do both. They've picked up a lot of the top prospects now on their list have been picked up in the last couple of days.
Yeah. And looking at their roster, I mean, it's not threadbare. I mean, by no means is it threadbare. It's still not a bad roster. Senga, Carrasco, Quintana, and Peterson. Okay, I'm not like be still my beating heart here, but at the same time, that those you could do worse in the starting rotation. They held on to Rayleigh and Ottavino, so now we kind of have a timeshare as at the closer spot. Maybe Rayleigh, who got the save over the weekend, will be first in line, but they still have Alonso. They still have Lindor. They signed Nimmo to a long-term deal. They have Beatty up in his rookie year. They, McNeil's had a terrible year, but they have Francisco Alvarez, for crying out loud. This is still a pretty solid core, a mix between young and old. And then you add all these prospects. I don't think they're that far away from contending again.
No, absolutely. I agree. Like you could have some players take a step forward. Maybe Alvarez takes a step forward next year. And then some guys like Jeff McNeil, like you said, have been Jeff McNeil's not a superstar, but he's usually better than what he was. Well, he's won a batting title, and this year he's not even a batting average asset. So I think that they could bounce back, and next year, could they just be sitting in the wild card hunt next year? Just a little bit of free agency addition on the pitching side, maybe, if that's something they want to do. I'm very surprised if we don't get word. I'm surprised they didn't trade Ottavino as well. I thought someone would give them some prospect for him, and why not at this point? So yeah. I'm surprised by that one.
I've been like keeping an eye on Twitter. I mean, I saw you DM me that Garrett Cooper got traded away, and Josh Bell too got dealt. So some stuff is still trickling in, which is kind of interesting to see. Like I kind of turned away and missed some of this stuff. We'll get to all that, but Ryan Yarbrough has gone to the Dodgers. They didn't get Eduardo Rodriguez. We'll kind of go ahead with that, but so we'll still see what's happening with some of this coming in, but we are catching our eye on a few things here and there. But one other thing with the one other thing with the Mets, Tommy Pham did go very late over to the Diamondbacks. So Tommy Pham is now in Arizona. He actually was a guy whose profile was raised a little bit with the trade deadline. His value probably went up a little bit. And now he goes to Arizona where, it's interesting. I think he's going to be, finding the playing time there is going to be interesting. You got Carroll, Thomas, McCarthy, and Gurriel already at the 3 outfield spots in DH. So, I mean, Carroll, Thomas, and McCarthy are all lefties. So obviously against, Pham starts all against the all left-handed pitchers probably, but he doesn't look like he's going to get a ton of starts against right-handed starters.
Yeah, this one will be interesting to me because like you name some guys who are major leaguers, but not really other than Carroll. Carroll's a stud. Forget Carroll. So that one spot's gone. But Gurriel has been like absolutely awful. Like in the last couple months, like after a hot start to the season, like he has been absolutely awful. Jake McCarthy's more of a fantasy guy than a real life guy. Like he spent time in the minors this year. He's a real other, because he steals bases. We love him in fantasy when he's playing, but he hasn't given them much as a hitter. He's got a 672 OPS, so nothing that that Tommy Pham couldn't beat if he's playing well. So I think this is them just maybe giving themselves more options. They can maybe ride the hot hand a little more. Alek Thomas still has an OPS under 700, both this year and in his career. So I mean, I think playing time's available for Pham. It'll just need to be earned. If I had to guess, he'll find his name in the lineup card once he gets there, maybe 3 or 4 times over the rest of the week. If he starts off pretty well, he can get some starts against right-handers too. If he doesn't, then maybe he's just a platoon guy, a guy who starts against lefties, comes in against lefties, whatever. But there are opportunities there. The Diamondbacks have obviously floundered and have given up a lead that they had at one point. I'm sure there was such a shortage, and I can say this as a Jays fan who was looking for them, such a shortage of impact bats that I think a team like Arizona would have loved to have gotten an impact bat, but this is the best they could come up with.
Yeah, and it's kind of tricky too, because what Arizona really needed was a starting pitcher or 3. They didn't get it. They did get a closer, which they also needed, by the way. Sewald is going to be, I would guess, Torey Lovullo is going to grit his teeth and finally say, okay, he's my full-time closer. He doesn't like doing that, but Sewald's got to be it.
Yeah, I think so too. I could see McGough or Ginkel getting the odd save, but I was going to say, let's say the Diamondbacks generate 12 saves for the rest of the season. I could see Sewald getting 9, something.
I was going to say 10. So there you go.
So something like that. Well, I mean, 12 saves. Like some of them will be in extra innings or something like that, something weird. Anyways, I do think that Sewald, this isn't a value up for Sewald because he already had a great role with the Mariners. But I don't think it's a big value down.
Right. I agree.
Probably just value even.
Yeah. I mean, the big arrow up obviously is what remains in Seattle, right?
Yes. Yeah. Andres Muñoz, if they go with him as their closer, could be a really good closer. Now the question is, will they? Are they going to? He's got great career numbers. He's got good numbers this year. He got their first save of the year, right? Like he got their save at the beginning of the season, and then a week later he's on the IL, and by the time he comes back, Sewald's entrenched as the closer.
Yeah, so, Muñoz. The only ability question is durability, right? Obviously what he
absolutely.
does is fantastic.
Yep.
Scott Service is basically the Pacific Northwest version of Kevin Cash, though. So I don't fully trust.
Yep.
Back in spring training, they were saying that. I think it was the Jerry DePoto was saying, like, we're going to use Muñoz typically wherever the toughest spot, whatever inning the toughest spot of the lineup comes up, which means sometimes you get the 8th inning.
Yep.
But now with Sewald gone, I don't think the dynamic is the same.
So let's say that the Mariners generate about a dozen save chances for the rest of the year. Maybe I'm a little low, by the way, when I say a dozen on these, but same thing, like 15, whatever. Let's say a dozen, 6 a month. So let's say they
stipulate a dozen. Yep.
Let's say they generate a dozen save chances for the rest of the season, or saves the rest of the season. How many does Muñoz get?
I think one less than Sewald does in Arizona. I think I would trust Seattle a little less than Arizona, but then again, both managers are kind of tricky as far as that goes.
Yeah, I would say one less at least. I might say two less. That's where I was kind of maybe leaning. They do have, Arizona, they probably have about similar level of options to Arizona. It's not like last year where the Mariners were just overflowing with really effective relievers, but Justin Topa could get a save or two. Matt Brash could get a save or two.
Yeah, Brash has been very good lately.
Yep, for sure. And he has that, that strikeout ability that could make him a good closer someday if, if the walk rate's fine. So anyways, I would say I would rather have Sewald for the rest of the year, but that's not really like a point for this. The point is, Muñoz, you go out and pick him up. If he's available, you go out and pick him up. Sewald's already gone. And if you have Sewald in the training league, like I'd say it's a value, pretty much value even.
Yeah. Surprisingly, Teoscar Hernandez remains behind. I think his name was rumored a lot in the last 48 hours and didn't get dealt. Kind of hard to figure out exactly what the Mariners are kind of doing here. I guess maybe they just saw value in their closer. Although he's gone for more than he would have been more than a 2-month rental. He was available. He's going to be on Arizona next year too. Teoscar, on the other hand, he's been a disappointment. He's not a good defensive player. His on base percentage is awful. He needed to get out of Seattle, frankly. Kelenic remains out. This is someone that probably should have been dealt, in my opinion.
I'm shocked that he wasn't dealt, because if there's any area where everybody talked about how this was a seller's market this year's trade deadline, which is true, but the area where it was probably most a seller's market was hitters, which is kind of weird because usually there's just not enough starting pitching to go around, but there were starters available and there were relievers available, and it was the hitters where you couldn't get any hitters. Teoscar Hernandez would have been the best hitter. I know he's having a down year, but with his resume from his career, he would have been the best hitter that a team could acquire. I'm surprised that they couldn't get a team to overpay for him.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So I'm a little surprised as well, but there you go. All right. So we won't spend a whole lot of time on the Mariners because they're in that vast middle. Yep. A team we had kind of expected to be maybe a seller, especially losing last night in just gut punch fashion, is the Padres. Padres 0-10 in extra innings this year, Fred. But yet, you look at their run differential, you look at, their roster, and you're like, this should be a contender. But then you look at where they are in the standings, and it's like, what are they going to do here? And, I think they're in a tough spot, really. I mean, currently in the NL West, they are 4th place. They're 8.5 games out. I mean, that's the Diamondbacks and the Giants are a fly in the ointment here. In the wild card, they're 5 games out. So that's viable. They're 52 and 55 plus 62 in run differential. That's all well and good for telling you what the strength of the team is, but it doesn't really help you on your playoff odds.
That's right. And I there's another team that I thought if they wanted to, and I know they're an aggressive organization, could have gone way in the other direction, picked up a lot for Blake Snell and Josh Hader, and just regroup for next year. And it would have been they spend money. So that would be easy. They might lose Snell and Hader anyways, but regroup for next year. So they decided not to do that. They're going to go for it. They do have a roster that, in my opinion, and I think most people's opinion, is better than the rosters of many current playoff teams. So the talent is there for them to catch up. There's 2 months left in the season. It's possible for sure, but they decided to add rather than subtract, picking up Scott Barlow and Garrett Cooper today.
And Rich Hill Don't
And Rich
forget the
Hill.
great
Okay.
Rich Hill and G-Man Choi. So,
Right.
big, huge day. No, I mean, the thing is, the Padres, I mean, let's face it, we didn't expect them to make a big stroke this year. I know there was some talk about them maybe trying to get involved in Verlander or something like that. And they definitely want to get Ohtani in the offseason. However, they have some significant issues financially because of the Bally's deal falling apart on them. But they aren't sellers. They're kind of buyers. And the good thing is the bottom half of the roster has been suspect all year.
Yep.
Nelson Cruz didn't work out. Matt Carpenter didn't work out. They've been using Gary Sanchez and Luis Campusano a lot lately as the DH and the catcher. So that kind of shows you where they're at. So getting G-Man, getting Cooper, you've now got a DH platoon, and obviously both can play some first base if they want to rest Cronenworth at all.
Who has been kind of disappointing this year. Like Cronenworth isn't having a great season. So yeah, so they've really okay, if you look at the players they acquired, it's not a super aggressive trade deadline, but compared to the teams this year, it actually is. It's one of the more aggressive trade deadlines this year. They added a notable reliever, they added a depth starter, they added multiple pieces to kind of platoon in out of their lineup. A lineup that, like you said, is full of star power in the top 5, and then really bad after that. And now, like, Garrett Cooper's having not an awesome season, but a decent season. You look at him hitting 6th or 7th in that lineup, and that's not bad. So, and same with Choi against righties. That's not bad. So, yeah, they were one of the most aggressive teams in baseball at this trade deadline, which I guess we shouldn't be too surprised, because it's like the Padres were going to go one way or the other, because that's just their nature. They weren't going to sit in the middle and just be like, yeah, we sit pat, we'll see what happens. Like, it's like if they weren't going to trade Snell and Hader, they were going to go out and do something. But they did do much more, I think, than either of us thought they would.
Yeah, that's right. Barlow, he adds to the bullpen. He adds some length to that bullpen. That's one of the things. When you have Blake Snell as one of your best starters, you know he's not going 7. You need to get the games to Hader. So now Barlow with Robert Suarez. Now all of a sudden they get those games to Hader. They held on to Hader through the trade deadline, even though Hader is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So I think this is one way. I think they learned they needed to get the games to the closer. They have that stud closer, but they were losing so many games in the 7th and 8th inning.
That's right. So we could say that maybe this is it's speculative, but a very small value up for Hader, just in that this may be a team that provides him with a few more leads to protect down the stretch. That's a tricky one with a closer. Like, maybe they score a lot more and the bullpen's really good and they win by 5. It's hard to say. But if we generally just want closers on good teams, there's a better chance now that he's on a good team down the stretch.
Yeah,
and a lot better than if they had not acquired anyone and had traded Blake Snell.
Yep, that's right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah.
So, so it's tricky. So we'll see what the Padres can do. Can they make that run, or is it going to be too little, too late? I actually think they can make the run. I mean, you look at the teams ahead of them. This isn't like the American League. Joe was making this point when he was on with me last Thursday. You got the Giants as the number 1 wild card right now. I don't think they're unassailable, and they didn't really do much at the deadline. By the way, they added a couple tiny pieces. The Phillies, I mean, they've been a little scratchy themselves. They did add a pitcher. We'll talk about that momentarily. The Marlins are tied for the 3rd wild card with the Diamondbacks and the Brewers. All 3 of those teams are vulnerable. Then there's the Cubs, who many people thought would be sellers until a week ago. Then there's the Padres. So there's really, I mean, it's not, just in terms of name value, there's there's the Astros, there's the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Blue Jays you're fighting with in the American League. I don't think it's as intimidating if you're the Padres sitting 5 games out in the wild card.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah. And the Padres do have the talent, especially in that rotation, to go on a run. And, I don't think we'd be surprised if at some point in August they won 8 out of 10, and then all of a sudden we're like 2 games back or something in the wild card. And
right.
then it's anybody's game from that point forward. I think it's, basically in baseball, teams kind of plod along and then slowly,
right.
But it wouldn't be surprising also, and we've seen it happen already, the Diamondbacks and the Marlins, but to see some of these teams, any of these teams now, if they have like a 2-8 stretch, could kind of put themselves out of it. The Padres are walking more of a thin line. Like, they can't afford a 3-7 10-game stretch the rest of the way. But good for them for going for it, because it was a seller's market, and they said, forget it, we're buying anyways.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. Yeah. We're going to talk a little Orioles. We're going to talk a little Marlins next. But first, we are on the Blue Wire Network, and we always like to play a couple of their ads for them. Here they are. Thank you for your patience and indulgence with that. As always, happy to be on the Blue Wire Network. Let's talk about the Orioles. For the longest time, it looked like they're going to do very, very little. Instead, they add Jack Flaherty right before the deadline.
Yeah, I thought they might do a little more. Like, I thought they might climb a little higher up the pitching ladder. Maybe Eduardo Rodriguez, who didn't move, and we can talk about that later. But I thought they might get someone better than Jack Flaherty. But I would have been shocked if the Orioles didn't do anything, just because they're leading their division, and they have such a glaring need. So, yeah, they didn't. It's not an exciting trade deadline. I think if you're an Orioles fan, it's not an exciting trade deadline, but your future is so bright that, like, it's hard to complain. You're like, we're winning the division. We picked up a pitcher. We didn't give up anything of value. Yeah, the future's really bright for us. Like, I get it. So, yeah, Jack Flaherty. So, what do you think of him? He's been not unplayable, but he has a 155 whip so far this year. So, kind of unplayable. Does he improve now that he's with the Orioles?
I mean, I don't think it hurts him. I mean, going to Baltimore helps for sure. I think if you look at what I think he's such a boomer bust guy that, you look at his starts and you can see some really brilliant starts in there, but then some utter disasters as well. I mean, it's really tough. I'm thinking like, and I was like, oh, he's been better lately. Then I looked at his last 60 days. No, he hasn't. 401, 157. Last 14 days, 573, 173. Okay. He's a rental. But then again, they just sent down Tyler Wells. Dean Kramer has looked pretty shaky lately. I mean, yeah, they're starting,
he's there for depth. He is there for depth, like you said, related to the Tyler Wells. Like, he's there to cover them while Wells is down. And then who knows? They know that when they're ready to bring Wells back, who knows who's going to be down or what they're going to need. He's there. I was going to say he's there to be their fifth starter, but they kind of already have some fifth starters, like Kramer, Gibson. Like, they're kind of fourth and fifth starters themselves in most people's eyes. So, but he's there for depth. He keeps the ball on the ground. His whip's going to be high. Like, his ERA's probably going to be okay. I guess if you already had him rostered, things look a little up now. He's gone to a team that's won a lot more games this year, so has a way better bullpen.
Yeah, it is way better bullpen, slightly better park, better defense, I would say.
Yep. And for a guy who gets a lot of grounders.
Yeah, and as Uncle Ted points out, St. Louis has been kind of toxic right now this year, and specifically to Flaherty, that relationship was burned a while ago. So maybe that's maybe one thing when he comes out firing. Who knows? I don't know.
That's what you're looking for. Like I said, if you have him. Like, if he's sitting on waivers in a shallow league, I don't think this trade would be enough to make me rush out and pick him up, because I think he's still a streamer. But if he's on your roster, if you rostered him through all this crumminess in St. Louis, I'd say now, I don't know if I roll him out for his first start. We'll see what the matchup is. But I think I've got like a little more hope that, like you said, he gets out of a toxic situation. He gets on a better team, amped up with the playoff chase. They play the Mets. Right now we have him slotted in to pitch Thursday against the Blue Jays. So, which actually makes a lot of sense. So I'm not using him for that one.
It's kind of funny that, it's kind of funny. I expected more out of the Orioles. Well, I didn't. I even said prepare to be underwhelmed. I'm whelmed. I'm not even underwhelmed. I'm whelmed. But they did this and they added Fujinami, and that's it. They didn't add anything else really from outside the organization via trade. I think Aaron Hicks was like a claim. Now he's hurt. But, I kind of expected them to behave a little bit more like a contender. And, they Lord knows they don't have like a lot of salary on the books. It's not like that was an issue. They could have afforded a hell of a lot more. But, Flaherty's just a rental too. So, granted, they don't give up much from their farm system. But, I know at one point they were like, hey, they're talking, people are talking about Logan Gilbert. People are, maybe Verlander would go to the Orioles. Never got close to that.
No. And yeah, on the hitting side, like everything says that the Orioles have overachieved so far this year.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the names, and like Ryan O'Hearn's their cleanup hitter.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Frazier's basically an everyday player for them, sits against lefties a lot, but basically an everyday player other than that. And who doesn't hit like ninth, like he's hitting sixth in their lineup. Like there was a lot of room but again, without impact bats, did they want to go out and get a Garrett Cooper or a Josh Bell or something like that and sit O'Hearn? I don't know if maybe they decided that doesn't really do much for us.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And they're winning, and they didn't want to rock the boat over a Josh Bell type if they couldn't get a star. But adding Flaherty was almost a necessity with their plan for Wells right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's stay in the division. Let's talk a little bit about your Blue Jays, Fred. I think, they made the big trade for Jordan Hicks over the weekend. They needed to do that. It felt like everything that they did was like a reaction to something. They trade for Hicks after Romano goes on the IL. They trade for Paul DeYoung today because Bo Bichette got hurt yesterday. Maybe they were talking about maybe adding a shortstop anyhow to add some middle infield depth, but it's not like they had this big swashbuckling trade. They were like trying to plug the gaps.
Yeah, for sure. I think, they say the Hicks trade was going to happen before Romano had the injury, that was going to happen either way.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll take them at their word. The Jays have a really good bullpen now when everyone's healthy. What they don't have, well, I guess Hicks is that now. I was going to say what they don't have is just that like Josh Hader level wipeout. Hicks isn't that. Like he's a good reliever. He throws super hard. He's got a career whip of 1.32. His ERA is 3.91. Like he's not like a lights out reliever. Never gets
very
I watched one of those like Felix Bautista last night. Like he's nothing like that. But anyways, he's a good piece. They've got a lot of pieces in that bullpen now where they can kind of throw like 3 or 4 innings. They've got Garcia, Swanson, Romero, Hicks. Like they've got a lefty with Meza who's having a good year. Like they could throw a lot of relievers out in a series and be just fine. They'll probably at some point have to send Nate Pearson. I wouldn't be surprised they have to send him back down at some point, which shows what kind of depth they have right now in the bullpen, which is good.
Kind of a cautionary tale on Jordan Hicks, by the way. Nate Pearson, Jordan Hicks, I mean, both known for just pure fire, throwing hard. But Hicks has that wipeout slider is the difference.
Yeah, and Hicks is a little like Pearson can throw like 100. Hicks throws 100 like all the time. Pearson can touch 100. Hicks just constantly throws 100 plus when he wants to. But yeah, I think I'm similar to what you just mentioned about being whelmed. I think that's how I am with the Blue Jays trade deadline. The Paul DeYoung, like that might have happened whether Bichette got hurt or not. I think they were looking for like a right-handed bench type bat, can mix in and out of the lineup, not a long contract. So he fits. He's having an okay year. Like for Paul DeYoung, he's got 13 homers. But he's a little more urgent now with Bichette. Although they say Bichette's just day to day. They say they're not sure about an IL stint. They're going to give him a few days and then see where it's at. So either way, it sounds like if it's an IL stint, it won't be a really long one. But they now have someone with DeYoung who could play shortstop, and he plays shortstop well. They have someone who can play shortstop defensively well, hit lower in the lineup. They're in a situation, the Blue Jays, in all honesty, like if they weren't going to get like a stud bat, and there weren't really a lot of weren't any available, they need their current players to play better. Like George Springer needs to come around. Like George Springer's been playing terribly.
Haven't we said that all year?
Yep, he has not come around, and everybody, including myself, just assumed eventually that would happen, and it hasn't, and it's gotten worse. Like he's in his biggest slump of the season right now. Guerrero needs to come around. Like Guerrero can't have an OPS that starts with a 7. Like that's not Vladimir Guerrero. That's not a superstar. Like he needs to have an OPS that if it starts with an 8, that next number needs to be like a 7 or an 8 or something like that. And he needs to come around. Dalton Varsho needs to come around. Like where the Blue Jays need to improve is just their current players and big name players just need to play better. And it's hitters. Their pitching is fine. Their bullpen's near the top of the league. Their rotation's fine. They've got extra depth with Ryu coming back. They just need their hitters to hit better.
Yep. Absolutely right.
And adding like another, like them getting like a Garrett Cooper or something, like that wasn't gonna do anything for them.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So like I said, I'm whelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can fly through the next 2 teams in the AL East, the Yankees and the Red Sox. Barely did anything.
Yeah.
The Red Sox got Luis Urias from the Brewers, and the Yankees got Keenan Middleton from the White Sox really late, and even later, Spencer Howard from the Rangers for cash considerations. Rangers basically out of 40-man roster spots. That's where the Yankees are at. They're taking, they're sweeping in to take 40-man roster spot guys. Now, I'll say Brian Cashman's good at that, and turning Spencer Howard back into a decent reliever might be something they can do. But what happened to improving the Yankees' offense?
I think the Yankees have given up. Like, I really do. I think their games in recent days have made them decide that this just isn't, like, they're 10 games out in the division. Like, I think there's just no offense there. Like, Judge would have to go on such a monster run to boost up this lineup. And then we keep coming back to, like, what were you going to get? Like, Teoscar would have been a perfect fit for them.
Yeah.
In that ballpark for the rest of the year as an impact bat. Like, that might have been something they could try to do, but if the Mariners were asking for a lot for him, I kind of think the Yankees have just given up. And they're not going to be bad. They're going to be like a 500 team for the rest of the season, and then they're going to retool and try to make the playoffs next year. But I think the playoff string is done. I think they've given up on this year.
Yeah, I guess so.
We're just so not used to seeing that from them.
Yeah.
If you
I agree.
The Yankees roster and put them on anyone else's team page, you would look at that roster and be like, and where they are in the standings, and be like, I don't think we're adding to this thing.
Right.
I think. Do you think I'm being too harsh on them? Do you think that they should have added?
I mean, you're paying for Aaron Judge every year, right?
Yeah.
You just paid for Carlos Rodon this year. You got Garrett Cole on the roster. You've got a really good starting pitch, really good pitching all around, actually. But I don't know. It starts with like Anthony Rizzo. He hit on the July 23rd, which is basically a week ago. He actually I'm looking at the wrong calendar, but yeah, it's still basically a week ago, a week and 2 days ago. He went 4 for 4 with a homer. It was his first homer since May 20th. Since then, of course, 27 plate appearances. He's hit 120. He's had 10 Ks and 1 walk. He's been awful again. He's in the middle of your lineup every single day, I guess. And that's just emblematic of their problems.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They've got these players that are older and just are so unexciting. You're not performing, however you want to put it. But LeMahieu, same thing. I also look at their lineup. I guess the way they would have had to do it is trade for someone and then just bench some of these high-priced veterans that are just underperforming. I guess they could move off Volpe for the rest of the season, but I don't think they want to do that. I just think they could have gotten Teoscar, and they could have maybe put him in the outfield, and maybe they sit Jake Bauers, or maybe that's
leadoff hitter Jake.
Yeah, Bauers, I was going to say, but they're batting him leadoff again tonight, so it's like they consider him to be one of their better players right now. So I don't know if benching him really makes sense. And then on the pitching side, I don't know what they really do have. Like Rodon hasn't been effective since coming back. Severino hasn't had a good year. I don't know what they're going to get from Herman going forward now. Behind Garrett Cole, there's not much that's exciting right now when you compare their rotation to, say, the Blue Jays rotation, or their rotation to the Astros rotation, or Texas's rotation, or the Twins rotation.
Right.
And their bullpen is good, but not completely insanely amazing. We have seen it at some points during their great runs. So, I think this is just a team that maybe needs to ride out the string. I'm maybe a little surprised that they couldn't throw a little money with some of their veterans. Maybe someone would have taken LeMahieu if they paid some of his contract and just given them someone for him. Maybe not. Maybe they couldn't do that. Or Kiner Falefa. There was a rumor that the Jays were in on him and then went to DeYoung instead.
Yeah. Yep. Maybe
same different kind of guy, but same level of player.
Yeah. So it's I guess it's really difficult. And by the way, the Red Sox did nothing. Urias, who they traded for, they optioned to AAA. So that kind of tells you,
long-term play for them.
Yeah, huge long-term play. No.
Yeah.
It was very challenging to see that. But I actually think the Red Sox aren't bad. I mean, I don't know if they get there this year. I would have liked to have seen another starting pitcher, like everybody else who needs another starting pitcher, especially because they continue to use Pivetta as with an opener in front of them more often than not. Pavetta's been really good,
Really
by the
good.
way.
Really good.
Yeah.
Maybe that was part of their thinking is, we think we can, this is sustainable for the rest of the season. They're not going to add a starting pitcher.
They are the classic injured player coming back is our trade deadline acquisition team with two guys with Chris Sale and with Trevor Story both.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a scenario for the Red Sox where those two players come back, play well. Tristan Casas keeps hitting. Devers has had a good year, but not like crazy good. Like he's averaged like 266 or something. He's had a really good year, but he could go on fire. Like he's that kind of player at some point who could go on fire. By the way, and I was looking at third base values in fantasy so far this year. Speaking of Red Sox, and at Yahoo, they had Justin Turner ahead of Devers so far this year, which is just wild to think. Justin Turner's had a really nice year for them, and maybe he can keep it going. But yeah, maybe there's a scenario where things kind of click with them. Story comes back, Sale comes back, and they do squeak into the playoffs.
They're only 2.5 games out.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
yeah, and the Blue Jays are a little bit vulnerable now with the Bichette injury. Like we'll see. They say it's not going to be long. We'll see what happens. So there's a team that maybe they could climb over. It's hard to think about catching Texas and Houston now after they just added aces. When other teams didn't go to that level. Although Texas kind of added an ace and lost an ace, right? With Eovaldi going down. I mean, Scherzer's a bigger name than Eovaldi, but Eovaldi had pitched so well this year.
For sure. That's true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get into the Dodgers, the Marlins, and the Reds, the lack of activity at the Reds, we do have to take care of a little business. We know the weather can impact how far a ball can fly, but we never know what all the heat and humidity or cold air is really doing to the ball. The Home Run Forecast Index gives us an easy way to determine how good or bad the air is for ball flight. The index is calculated by measuring stadium-specific weather conditions and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being the most unfavorable for good ball flight, and 10 indicating the most favorable air. There is a strong correlation between the index and the number of runs scored per game and the number of home runs hit. Games have the highest index, 10 for the whole game, average over 10 runs and 2.8 homers over the course of the year. It's kind of like every game in Coors Field or Great American Ballpark in the summertime. An index is created for each game, so you can see what it will be in any stadium and how the weather's influence might change over the course of the game, as well as the wind direction. Right now, you can get access to the HRF premium site for only $5 a month and see what the index will look like for every hour of every game. Go to homerunforecast.com now to sign up. Once again, that's homerunforecast.com. All right, let's talk a little Dodgers here, Fred. And then we'll hit the Marlins and then the Reds, and we can fill in any others we want to do. But the Dodgers, the big story for them today was the noteworthy story was what they didn't do. They did not get Eduardo Rodriguez. They did not get another starting pitcher. After getting Lance Lynn over the weekend, they fell short in their quest to get another veteran starter.
Yeah, that's got to be a tough one for Dodgers fans and Dodgers management, I guess. Like, they can't get mad at the management. They had a trade arranged for Eduardo Rodriguez, and then he nixed it and decided he's going to stay in Detroit. And I don't know the answer on that. We'll probably find out at some point what was his thinking behind wanting to stay in Detroit. You'd think the ability to leave the Tigers and go and play on a really good Dodgers team, pitch in the postseason this year, would be a really great opportunity for him.
Well, there's a couple things. We don't know everything that happened, but two things.
Yep.
He had 10 teams on that no trade clause list.
Yep.
It's there to give him the leverage, right? And otherwise he gets to opt out at the end of the year. So if you think about that, the Dodgers are probably trying to get him to not use that opt-out clause. They're trying to find a way to get him to accept a deal and then knowing that it's more than a rental. They couldn't come to terms on that. He may say they want to be more on the East Coast. I've seen that going around, but this is one indication where he has the leverage. That the Tigers also, in a way, have that leverage. They're the ones that offered that deal to him in the first place. They negotiated that deal. I say, if you're Rodriguez, good for you for exercising your rights, especially when you're going to be a free agent at the end of the year.
Yep, it's totally a possibility. Also, Rodriguez missed about half of last season with personal issues that took him away from the team. And maybe he's just we don't know what's happened in his personal life since then. So maybe he's just decided to you know what? I'm comfortable in Detroit. Things are going well for me in my personal life now. I'm pitching well. I'm not going out to LA for maybe reasons that have nothing to do with baseball. I'm not going out to LA for the next 3 months. And, like, I think I can stay in Detroit and have similar stats for the rest of the season and set myself up for a good payday in free agency. And I'm not going to take, I've already been through a rocky season last year. Off the field, I'm not gonna tempt that again. So maybe it was just that. Maybe he was like, you know what? If I don't see a situation where I feel like off the field is perfect for me, I'm staying where I am.
Yep.
And that's his prerogative.
Yeah, it
but
is.
Tough for the Dodgers that they were not able, because that news kind of came out around an hour before the deadline. So tough for them that they were not able to pivot to someone else of better than Ryan Yarbrough.
I think it's noteworthy that the Dodgers didn't trade any of their big name prospects. This is a deep farm system, a really strong farm system, some big names at the top. They didn't trade away, and they didn't trade Miguel Vargas, for instance. So I thought they could have, they sent him down, didn't trade him away. DePaula didn't get dealt. Gavin Stone didn't get dealt. Vargas didn't get dealt. None of their catcher prospects, Dalton Rushing or Cartaya, none of those guys got dealt. They were clearly going for rentals. They were clearly going for low price additions. Why? Because they didn't want to go over the luxury tax threshold, and they want to, go big after Ohtani in the offseason.
That's right. Yeah, I think the Ohtani thing is looming over all that, which is what made now. So now I'm not sure if they really cared if Rodriguez opted out or not. Right? Like maybe they were like, this guy's perfect. He's going to pitch well for us for the rest of the year. Then he's going to opt out, and then that just clears the deck for Ohtani. Although, I mean, Ohtani can't be the only player that you have. Having Rodriguez would still be helpful. But anyways, it's I think that's where maybe, I guess, where the Dodgers are at now is just they could win the World Series this year with this team. I think it's possible, but not likely, but possible. And but it's all about clearing the deck for Ohtani.
And there is no super team, I think, in baseball. The Braves are as close as it gets, but I think they're still flawed with their starting rotation. Or the Braves didn't get a starter either, for that matter.
I was surprised that the Braves didn't add more at the deadline.
Right. They just added some bullpen parts here and there, and Nicky Lopez. Yay, Nicky Lopez.
Yeah, I was I was a little surprised that they didn't add more at the deadline, but they've done really well. So I guess they've decided they're good enough with what the asking prices were. But
and honestly, the Dodgers are, despite all their flaws, which we've enumerated before, they're still 14 games over 500. This is essentially what they kind of said to everybody by how they acted this offseason, letting Trey Turner go, trading away Justin Turner, or letting Justin Turner walk, not picking up the option on Cody Bellinger. That actually kind of blew up in their face a little bit, to be honest. I was a little surprised that they didn't keep him around, and B, that it's turned out so well for the Cubs. But point is, kind of follow, their behavior at the deadline kind of follows their behavior in the offseason. They'll do some little things here and there, but they're not making that big, massive swing. They added Ryan Yarbrough. They added two right-handed bats. Ahmed Rosario is, that's a fine add. They gave up Thor. They were so desperate for starting pitching, and they disliked Thor so much that they dealt him away before he could even throw an inning before coming off the IL.
And that was a smart move. That was addition by subtraction, getting rid of Thor. Yeah, you can see when you look at their depth chart, they've got the three left-handed hitting outfielders, Peralta, Hayward, Outman, which is remarkable to think that a Dodgers team is going to go into the playoffs with that as their starting outfield, but that is it. And then they've got the three right-handed hitters on the bench in Rosario, Chris Taylor, and Hernandez, who they can put all of those in the starting lineup against a lefty, and then have the other three on the bench when a right-handed reliever comes in. So they've got studs at the top. They're going to mix and match at the bottom of the lineup throughout the game. They did add Lance Lynn, which we'll see, but there is potential there. Like, there's potential for Lance Lynn. Like, we know that. He's had a lot of good seasons in his career. So there's potential for Lance Lynn to help them a lot. Rodriguez would have been, I think, the icing on the cake for a pitching staff that could really use him. But and some more bullpen help for a bullpen that hasn't been as good as we're used to from the Dodgers this year. But the National League continues to be still the Braves and then everybody else. And like you said,
I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
The Braves are vulnerable in the starting pitching side. Like Bryce Elder could really downturn at some point, and
Already has, kind of. Yeah.
he has. That's what I mean. I mean, really downturn to the point where he's getting the Tyler Wells treatment.
No, Jeff, really downturn.
Yeah, really, like Tyler Wells downturn. Like, you are no
Yeah.
longer in our rotation
Yeah.
downturn. And Yonny Chirinos, like, we'll see. Like, what they get out of him. Hopefully it's good, but we'll see what they get out of him. That's definitely no sure thing, but they'll get Max. If they get Max Fried back and they have, they're good starting, like Fried, Morton, Strider, Elder are all healthy and somewhat effective the rest of the way, it's still a really good team. Like, that lineup is just awesome.
Yep. Let's talk about a team whose fan base is probably pretty happy with what they did, even if they weren't huge names. They were buyers at the trade deadline, and that's the Marlins. The Marlins are buyers, and the Mets are sellers. What a turnaround!
Yeah, showing that it's not just your budget; it's also how you actually do on the field.
Yep,
that guides some of this. Yeah, so the Marlins made like an interesting swap where they have sent out Garrett Cooper and brought in Josh Bell. That feels like about an even. To me, it feels like about an even swap. And then they've added Jake Berger.
Yep.
So I guess that helps.
And that was an interesting trade on that. Let's talk Berger for Eder. Eder or Eder? How's it pronounced? Do you know?
I do not, but I know that he was their fourth ranked in a lot of systems, their fourth ranked prospect going into the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave up someone who's was significant on their prospect list at least. So I just have MLB.com up. They already have Eder. I'll go with Eder as the fourth ranked prospect on the White Sox.
Yeah. Number 173 on James Anderson's recently updated list, which you can check out for free, by the way. All I have to do is, and he has him as their number 2 prospect, believe it or not.
Okay.
You can check that out, rotowire.com/pod. And we've extended the deal that we're doing with Fantasy Cares as well. So you go get that free trial. It's a couple of days, peek behind the paywall, no credit card required. For every person that does that, we'll donate $1 to fantasycares.org. It's the same charity that the Scott Fishbowl benefits. So we are a big believer in that company, that organization. So rotowire.com/pod, free trial. We donate $1 to Fantasy Cares. You check out the prospect list as you're getting ready for a big week in terms of free agent bidding. If you're in, if you've got like a free agent period and score sheet, a lot of these prospects that you're getting traded are guys that you're going to be trying to pick up. So check that out. rotowire.com/pod. You do get football stuff along with the membership. Thanks, Uncle Ted, for the question. That's a very good question. Yes, you do. rotowire.com/pod. Get access to all of our season-long fantasy content with that free trial. All right, Fred. So all that said, little ad pitch in the middle there. Not even an ad pitch, just telling us what we have available. But so Jake Berger, quietly has 25 homers this year. Maybe not quietly for the people that have him. It's about homer or nothing, though, is the interesting thing about him. Hitting 214, 279 on base, but slugging 527, 25 homers and 323 plate appearances. He's going to start at third base pretty much for the Marlins, I would guess.
Yeah, so the park switch isn't a favorable one for him, but he does get off a White Sox team that seems to be kind of just can't get out of their own way, and he's on a team that's exciting and trying to make it into the postseason. I don't know if long term, if Jake Berger is going to be like a fantasy asset and a good MLB player, like guys like him with just abysmal strikeout to walk rates, who are just kind of almost purely relying on the long ball.
Right.
He's going to walk a very fine line. I could see him having some bad seasons where the on base percentage is 260 and the power is not quite, is there. And so I don't think this seems to me to be a good sell high for the for the White Sox. To me, that seems to be a good sell high for the White Sox.
I agree.
From a fantasy perspective, it locks Berger into a regular spot on a team that's trying to win and a team that has a lineup that's not great, but not terrible. He's around some. Jazz Chisholm's back. Brian De La Cruz is having a decent season. Solaire's having a good year. Arias obviously is a on-base machine. He's in a decent lineup now. Like I said, the park won't do him any favors, but it is cool that between Berger and David Robertson, the Marlins, even with a losing streak at one point in July, the Marlins are in.
This is a weird trade deadline for the Marlins, though. Yeah. I got to say, because they didn't improve at catcher. It's still Stallings and Fortes.
Yep.
They didn't add a starting pitcher. Trevor Rogers and Max Meyer on the IL. Yuri Perez is coming back at some point. That's their version of this guy is our trade deadline acquisition pitcher. But they did markedly improve their bullpen. They added a closer in David Robertson. Puck is obviously out in that role now. They traded for Jorge Lopez in addition, but it's just I don't think it's enough. And then Josh Bell, obviously at first base, swapped out put in Josh Bell for Garrett Cooper.
Yeah, which to me really feels like a wash. I do think from a baseball perspective, more than a fantasy perspective, them getting Johnny Cueto back a little over a week ago, I could totally see Johnny Cueto just giving them a series of 5 or 6 innings, 3 runs allowed, nothing exciting, but just using his spot in the rotation, finishes the year with maybe a 4.2 ERA, soaks up some starts for them, keeps them in some ball games. I could see him doing that for that team. Kind of similarly. So how about this? I could see Johnny Cueto pitching just as well for the rest of the season as Jack Flaherty, for example.
I could see that.
And they added him off their IL. So he's a boost to their rotation in his own way. He's an unexciting. I could see him pitching just as well as Michael Lorenzen, who we haven't got to yet, but is picked up by their rival, the Phillies. So they just added Cueto back. Yeah, they'll get Perez at some point for some amount of time. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I think the Marlins are good enough that they're going to hang around the dividing line at the wild card spot all the way to the end of the season. I don't think they're good enough to pull away where they're sitting there in the last week resting guys, but I don't think they're bad. I think that they'll sit there right around the wild card spot. How about this? I think that's a better roster than the Reds right now.
Ooh, shots fired.
Or any NL Central team. I think that it's a more complete roster because the Reds have such issues with pitching right now and didn't acquire anyone.
Stunningly added nobody.
Not even a Jack Flaherty. Not even a Michael Lorenzen.
They added one left-handed reliever, Sam Maul. That's it. That's the list. I see the argument that the Reds were playing with house money. My counter argument is the Mets are trading off. The Padres have a long way to go to catch up. The Cardinals are trading off. The teams that are around them, the Brewers, the Cubs, the Diamondbacks, the Marlins, the Giants, they're all gettable. This is a rare opportunity. When you have a chance to make it, you do it, is the way I look at it. And instead, they said, "Oh, we're not going to give away any of our prospects." And maybe it was just a really crappy market. Maybe just they're asking Encarnacion Strand for Erod and for 2 months of Erod, in which case I'd probably say no too. Maybe, the Cardinals said, we're not going to trade with you. That's still a possibility, right? I don't think the Cardinals behave like that, but it's possible. Maybe especially with the Reds. I don't know. But nonetheless, it was frustrating to see the Reds do nothing except add the tactical reliever. And Hunter Green can't come back until August 17th, by the way. Lodolo is not coming back until at least then, if maybe even September. There's no help walking through that door.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, in their defense, I guess the Brewers didn't add much either. Mark Canha's probably not going to swing this race.
Carlos Santana's a pretty good actor.
Actually, you're right. You're right. I'm thinking back. I'm more just thinking the last 2 days. You're right. You're totally right. I didn't trace that one back enough because it goes back about a week. But you're right. That's a deadline ad. You're right. That is I think a significant piece for them. I don't think Carlos Santana's awesome, but he's hitting third in their lineup. So
yeah. They added Chafin today too. Andrew Chafin as a lefty piece. So this is a deep bullpen. Brewers bullpen is far superior to the Reds bullpen.
Absolutely.
The big advantage for them.
I think the Brewers are better than because the pitching is such a difference on the Brewers, that the Brewers are better than the Reds, but that doesn't mean they're going to beat the Reds. The Reds can hit a bit and they could still squeak their way in. And if you believe in all these soft skill type things, the experience of a playoff run, to get into the playoffs, and then the experience of even one series would be valuable for all these young Reds.
For sure. 100%.
To learn what it's like. I mean, some people scoff at that. Pure stats people are whatever. But the people who are more on the scout side, those people will say, just a feel of what playoff baseball is like, even if it was one series and they lost, would be, and they'll get, and if they win the division, they'll get home field for that one series, right? So.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I think all those things are valuable. And plus the Brewers are also getting Woodruff back too. That's coming. He's got a rehab start tonight actually, and then he might come back this weekend or next week. Point is that's another big ad. If we'll see if it's a big ad. He's coming back from a shoulder problem, and those are you're never sure. But I was disappointed the Reds didn't. Disappointed, but not surprised that the Reds didn't do more. I prepared to be disappointed, so I'm not like in agony, but I kind of like at the same time want even like a league average arm. How could it be worse than Luke?
Well, like I said, Michael Lorenzen is who we haven't talked about yet, but
let's do that.
Like Michael Lorenzen is probably the epitome this year. He's actually outperformed his skill set a little bit, but he's got a 110 whip. Like that's really good. But he's probably about the epitome of a league average or arm.
And he's a total sell high too. I mean, if there is such a thing as a sell high on the market, it was Lorenzen, right?
Yeah.
They're going with the 6-man rotation, which I find interesting. I don't know what that brings in the long term for them, but it's I think eventually Christopher Sanchez or Ranger Suarez will probably move to the bullpen. It might be some. There might be some issues there, at least in terms of innings limits, things of that nature. But still, I like what the Phillies did there.
I think the Phillies. I think Sanchez has just been too good to take him out of the rotation right now.
He has, but it gives them a little bit of a just in case sort of thing.
Yep.
They noteworthy though. They didn't do much else. I kind of thought maybe they do a little bit more, but they have spent a lot the last couple of years. They could lose Aaron Nola at the end of the year this year. That was one of the things where I was like, well, maybe they'll go with a bigger deal. Then again, what do they have to deal with? Andrew Painter is not coming back anytime soon. No one's going to trade for him as a top prospect. They don't have a very deep farm system. So maybe that's why they didn't do anything bigger. Real Muto got scratched today, by the way, with the hand injury. It's just a cut on his hand, but it's per Matt Gelb. The Athletic, he said it's a huge gash on his throwing hand. Didn't he have like that hand injury he suffered the day of the labor draft or the day after the labor draft that 1 year?
Yeah, I do. I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. Trey Turner has been a big disappointment so far. And hey, they spent the money on Trey Turner. He's down hitting 6th now, hitting 242, 296, 378. Really awful season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've had some highs and lows, like Kyle Schwarber's hitting the 100s, for most of the year. But Alec Boehm's having a pretty good year. Bryson Stott's had a better year than people were expecting. So they've had some ups.
Marsh.
Yes. Although Marsh kind of was good and then tailed off, and he's come back a little bit recently. He's had highs and lows just himself this year. Either way, I think this Phillies team is good enough that I do think they'll be one of the wild card teams. There's just enough in that rotate. Like unless Nola, Nola's also the kind of guy he can go up and down within a season and could go on a run. Wheeler's good. Like they've got those twin aces at the top, and then they've got now depth behind them.
They're dangerous.
Yeah, like Turner could come around at any point. Like no one would be surprised if Turner came around and hit 300 from this point forward. So if I was picking teams in the NL to grab the wild card spots right now, the Phillies would definitely be one of them. And Lorenzen, he's not a big move, but like you said, he's the exact type of player that a team like the Reds would have benefited from getting. Just someone who could hopefully give them like a 4 ERA and start every 5th day the rest of the way.
Yeah. Despite Brandon Marsh's lows, he's still got an 820 OPS and plays superb defense in center field. He's been a winning player for this team this year for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was one of those guys at the beginning of the year, like April, he had an OPS over 1,000 and all the indicators said he was playing way over his head. And then May, he had a 599 OPS and just everything bottomed out. And then since then, June is 754. So he only hit 2 home runs the whole month, but whatever. And then July, he didn't hit any home runs, but he had an 822 OPS. He hit some doubles and, hit 288. So he's been kind of a little bit all over the map this year, but as you said, with good defense and an 820 OPS, hard to complain.
Yep.
Especially for a guy who hits low in your lineup.
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah.
Hyun-Jin Ryu making his debut for the Jays. This is another one of those. Injured player comes back and is an acquisition. He's losing 1-0. I think it's about to be 2-0. But it's still What do you think about Hyun-Jin Ryu going forward?
So yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in his comeback this
I don't
year.
either.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like they're going 6-man for now because they're in a stretch of 17 and 17,
Yeah.
and so sure. I'm not optimistic about Alek Manoah, but
Hmm.
I am more optimistic about Alek Manoah than Ryu.
Okay.
I
Fair.
don't think Ryu's like radar gun readings are what they need to be right now. And if I had to guess, I don't know. I don't have a good feeling. I didn't even look for him on the waiver wire, even in my 15 team leagues. I didn't even look at him, even with starting pitching.
Yeah.
Hard to come by. Maybe I'll be wrong. Hopefully I'll be wrong. Although apparently I'm not watching the game, and apparently I'm right so far.
2-0 top of the first 2 outs now.
Yeah,
He just got couldn't complete the double play. The batter beat it out. I'm
you could
sure it was
really see some air come out of the Blue Jays balloon here, where
yeah.
like they had been playing well, and the Orioles come to town for 4, and I think they were 4.5 out at the start of that series, and now game 1 they lose Bichette, and he's probably out for at least the rest
Yeah.
of the series. Like if this series goes poorly for them, I could feel they could get it back. Like the Orioles, they're not really chasing the Orioles. The Orioles
Yeah.
are winning the division. Like if they want a wild card spot, not really chasing the Orioles. But yeah, I could feel some air from Blue Jays fans come out of the balloon last night when they lost and Bichette got hurt.
Yeah, player on a leg injury playing their home games on artificial turf. Yeah, not great.
Yeah,
Not
so
great, Bob. And it's funny how the Blue Jays are this year's Red Sox, just getting slaughtered by their own division.
yeah, that's what's happened to them. Which, as I mentioned to you with the Reds and the Brewers, and now I'll turn it back on my own team. Like in this era,
Karma comes around real fast, Fred.
yep. In this era of balanced schedules, it isn't bad. I do find it a little refreshing to see a team where you're like, hey, you got to beat your rivals. You can't. It's not good enough to go beat the Royals. It's not good enough to go, beat the Angels or something like that. You got to beat
Yeah.
your rivals if you want to get up to the top of your division. So I think that is interesting. And I've definitely seen on Bichette, because I'm sure some fantasy owners are like freaking out about that one. I've definitely seen on Bichette mixed messages from the Blue Jays. Like I've seen, we're not sure if we're going to put him on the IL. And then I think Ross Atkins had a comment this afternoon though that was more like, we're quite confident that Bo will contribute to our team again this season. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
The very nebulous, no structural damage coming also.
Yeah. So like the first comment was kind of made me feel like he would be back like this weekend or early next week, or at worst a short IL stint. And then the next one, I was like, wait a minute. He's an interesting guy, by the way, for fantasy, depending on how he goes from this. Like he's hit well this year, but more just like typical Bichette. He's hitting 321, which is a little better than he usually does. But 847 OPS is basically exactly the same as what he usually does. And he's not stealing bases. Again, this is 3 this year after 13 last year. And now with the knee, like I bet he's going to finish the season with 5 steals or less.
I didn't realize he was only at 3.
3
we talked about his decline last year in the sprint speed, remember?
Yep.
And sure enough, it's a pretty good indicator for future stolen bases. Maybe not even this year, but for the following year, when you start to see that decline, it's going to be a little bit tougher going forward. One more team I wanted to talk about. Well, 2 teams. One trade that kind of sparked the conversation, and that is the Rays trading for Aaron Civale. I think that was like a very targeted, perfect trade for them, but they gave up a lot in Manzardo too.
Absolutely. Because it's the Rays, we're going to assume that they know what they're doing, and that like all the ERA indicators say that Civale's pitched way over his head this year, but pitching over your head is what Rays pitchers do. So
and he's a big spin guy, and that's something that Rays pitchers also do.
If I have Civale, like I'm doing cartwheels. I'm thinking this is great because to me this just increases he's not going to be better. Like he's at 234 ERA and a 104 WHIP. He's not going to be better, but this raises my hopes that he can be similar the rest of the way, which is still which would be amazing. So yeah, I think this is like you said, a targeted acquisition. They traded someone who is a good prospect, who dynasty people will be really interested in, but who in the minors has not hit lefties.
And has had a kind of a tough year.
This year.
Professionally and personally. There's some family, I think he was away from the team for a while dealing with a personal issue. I don't even know if he's back, but James's recent rankings, he's still away right now. Is listed as a shoulder, but there's also other issues going on. I think, and I don't know what those are. I don't want to kind of too much on him, but he went from a 987 OPS last year in Double-A to 784 in Triple-A this year. Granted, He's 22 years old. He's one of the younger players in AAA. So perhaps we need to kind of not react too much to this season.
Yeah, I think Jeff Zimmerman tweeted out some comps to him through Fangraphs, and they were good. Like
Yeah.
some major league comps for him in Fangraphs, and they were really good. So, but he does have that range of outcomes where it does seem like this is someone who like could get his act back together next year and become, at the very worst, a good major league power hitter who you start against right-handers.
For sure.
Whether you can start him against lefties or not. Yeah. So it does get him out of that Rays organization that would have platooned the crap out of him if that was if he had ended up sticking with them. And maybe with Cleveland he'll get a better runway to develop his ability to hit lefties, which would be part of the key to him unlocking maybe like full fantasy potential. But yeah, I think that's I do. Like you said, I think targeted is a great way to put that trade where maybe the Rays identified Savali. It's also really interesting to see the Guardians trading away a player when they are like right on the cusp. They're
right.
One game out.
Multiple players too now.
That's right. They traded Josh Bell.
And Ahmed Rosario.
Who I don't know if the way he was playing this year, like, wasn't really helping them, but like he was having a pretty bad year. But Josh Bell had a really bad start to the year and then turned things around and had been okay. So
they're one game out in the Central,
like there's no real way to sugarcoat this. Cleveland's kind of giving up.
It's kind of a white flag deal. I think they view it as, how else are we going to get a hitting prospect like Manzardo? The only way to do that is to trade a viable starting pitcher, and to a team. And it's kind of a perfect match of organizations. The Guardians are kind of deep in young pitching, right? They have a number of these rookies in the rotation. They're good at developing pitchers. The Rays are good at developing pitchers too, but they're needing arms right now. Meanwhile, the Rays have a 40-man roster crunch every year. It seems like they have like still 3 or 4 top 50 prospects in James's list. They've got the number 6 prospect in Caminero, the number 10 prospect in Curtis Mead. Point is, they're doing all right. Yeah. They'll be okay even without Manzardo. They still have Xavier Isaac. Is a top 50 guy. Braden Taylor is another guy they just drafted who is already in our top 100. So you can look at it from that standpoint. I mean, they're doing okay. So yes, you don't want to just give away a prospect, but this is one of those things where both teams are really helped.
Yeah. Along the lines back to Cleveland for a second, along the lines of them giving up, they traded for Gene Segura in the Bell trade, and apparently they're cutting him. Aren't even keeping him on the roster.
So that was, we're going to take this luxury tax hit.
Yeah. So I guess so they picked up Segura, and again, this to me is like Segura is not having a good season, but actually in July he looked a lot like Gene Segura. He hit 277 playing full time. That's Gene Segura. He hits 277 with not much power, and like a Cleveland team that has like nothing on the bench right now on their depth chart didn't want to just keep Gene Segura around for the rest of the season. I find that one really, again,
they already have released him. Yeah.
They
were trading for Khalil Watson then.
Sure, for sure. I'm just shocked that they wouldn't want to have Segura, who could easily hit for them at least 250, if not hit close to 300 the rest of the way. At least have him as a rotational piece on their team when they're one game out. But so to cut him, he's like Gene Segura, I think, is going to get picked up in pretty short order by somebody.
Very odd.
Yeah,
very odd
that one might be my most surprising. Just it's not earth shattering. I have Segura. I have him in my lineup in tout.
I picked him up in one league somewhere. Yeah. And I forget which one. But
it's a bit of an empty batting average, but it's still with the Marlins. It had become again a batting average and the occasional counting stat. So
not lately, not even lately though. I mean, he's hitting 217 for the season. Even like the last 21 days, 235, 250, 353, 250 on base is a killer. So yeah, I guess I see it, but
he's not having a good year, but I still am surprised that they wouldn't want him just as a bench player, can field multiple positions. I'm surprised they wouldn't want to have him for the rest of the year.
I guess they'd rather have Tyler Freeman and Gabriel Arias, I guess, right?
Again, it makes me feel like they're giving up. Like they're just saying, let's just play someone else. Let's just play someone who might be in the organization.
Yeah. Well, they're down to like 3.5 starters right now. Tanner Bybee, Gavin Williams, and Logan
Yep.
Allen. And then Xavier Curry has been kind of like an opener.
Yep.
Thor is Dave.
Jeff, I don't know if your mic cut out, but
Oops, sorry about
there you
that.
go. You're back. I missed your
did cut
wise
out.
thoughts. I missed your wise
Noticed
thoughts.
that.
But I will say that, yeah, that Cleveland rotation is not making the playoffs. You know, I think they've given up. I think they see McKenzie's not back for a while. Bieber, like this, it's just not their year. And if they somehow went like ass backwards into the playoffs, they're going to be there for all of about 2 games. So, you know,
Right.
whatever the minimum is, right? So I think they're done. I think they just said, like the Yankees, they said, I mean, even more so, they said, Minnesota, go ahead, take the division. Yeah. You can have the 1 playoff series. We're going to regroup.
Yep. The thumbnail edition of what I said is Thor's on the roster too.
Yeah.
Basically, that's it. He's dealing with a hammy though. He might even go on the IL his own right there.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
that was another puzzling trade. I know, I know Ahmed Rosario is not having a good year, but Thor, like, really?
Yeah.
Like, you wanted Thor? It doesn't make a lot of, to me, that doesn't make much sense either.
And it wasn't like we'll take Thor so we can we can also get a prospect. You know, at least that was the weird part to me.
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland fans of all the teams, like, I know that your Reds didn't do anything. Cleveland actively sabotaged their chances of coming back from 1 game out to make that. Like, they were for sure a better roster a week ago before they traded Rosario for Thor and then traded the players they have in the last 2 days. So, like I said, like, they have basically waved the white flag and said to Minnesota, go ahead, you can have the 1 playoff series against these good AL teams. Like, we're out.
And Minnesota kind of shrugged and said, I guess we're not going to do anything either.
Yeah, we're not going to do anything, but we'll at least just keep what is a pretty good looking rotation. We'll just keep it together.
Yeah, I'm looking for an ad that they did actually, and struggling to find it.
Yeah,
I mean, they swapped struggling relievers, Floro for Lopez.
Yep, that's
it. I think that's it.
Yep.
Wow, what a cynical division. What a terrible,
Yeah.
You got the Royals that are just awful, and at least they're trying to retool, and they have a new GM. Okay, the Tigers traded away Lorenzen, tried to trade away Erod, couldn't. The White Sox obviously selling anything that's not nailed down. It's what a terrible division. Oh,
it would actually be wide open for. We talked about the Tigers 3 weeks ago. It's still wide open for the Tigers. Then they kept Erod against their own will. Screwball's back. Manning's been pitching pretty well. Like, it would be possible for them to use that. Like, maybe if everybody hit their ceiling to catch up, like Cleveland may just drop right out of it, and then you're just chasing Minnesota. Maybe you have a series against Minnesota and you sweep them, and all of a sudden you're in it.
Right.
But I think they'll just plod along. I think Minnesota will win 82 games or something and win the division, and then just go out quickly in the playoffs.
Sounds
that it is the worst. It is the most boring division in baseball, and it's not even close. Like, the NL Central is way more interesting,
for sure.
Partially because the team, like the Reds, are interesting, and then this Cubs thing is kind of interesting. Like, the Cubs coming back from way down, where you thought they were sure sellers, and then them coming back, winning 8-10 going into the deadline, not selling, adding Candelario. Like, that's interesting.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. All right, Fred. I think we covered this pretty thoroughly. Is there any other teams you want to hit up, or are we good to go here?
I think if we missed you, you were very irrelevant, because we hit the good and the bad. So
yeah, I think so.
We didn't get to you. You weren't worth getting to.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
Probably so. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Fred and I appreciate it. Next week, we will not be on YouTube. We will still stream on Facebook and Twitter. And then, of course, you can find it wherever you normally get your podcast. But the YouTube channel is going to be dedicated pretty much to football going forward here. So just a heads up on that. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. Appreciate all the comments, and hopefully jump in on the Facebook stream next week there. You can still chime in the comments that way. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you. Take care.